Welcome to our weekly conversation program. We call it Moral Side of the News. We're glad you're with us this weekend. I'm John Blim with the WHAS Crusade for Children. As always, I'm joined by a distinguished panel. Reverend Clay Calloway, West Louisville Ministers Coalition. Rabbi Emerita Gaylia, Rooks, the Temple. Reverend Sally McClain, Christian Church Disciples of Christ. And Father Tony Smith, Archdiocese of Louisville. Welcome, panel. More horrors unfolded this week in the Israel-Hamas conflict, including hundreds of deaths at a hospital in Gaza. Here at home, there are demonstrations in support of both Israel and Palestine, and a predominantly Jewish preschool in Louisville went on lockdown briefly after receiving what it considered a threat. Meantime, President Biden has drafted an aid package to send financial support to both Israel and Ukraine. So we turn to our panel on Moral Side of the News. And panel, where do you want to begin with this story?
Okay. Well, I
defer.
You know, it's interesting. People have referred to me as a left-leaning liberal, and I own that. I don't try to deny that. But what's fascinating to me is that in America, the left-leaning liberals are going so far to the left as to be turning their anger against Israel. And I just want to start by saying that one does not need to condone any form of occupation or discrimination or anything against Palestine in order to be totally 100% outraged and offended by the war crimes, the crimes against humanity, just the vicious atrocities of Hamas. And, you know, a lot of people say, oh, you know, Israel wants to, you know, they don't want the two-state solution. Well, when they had a partner, they were working toward a two-state solution with the Palestinian Authority, with Abbas. And when Hamas, which is recognized as a terror group by all of Europe and America and many countries, and when they took over the Gaza Strip, then Israel no longer had a partner to work with toward peace. So I now I'm getting into politics, but what I'm trying to say is there is a difference between caring about the civilian population of Gaza, for whom my heart goes out, and well, I won't say no, but very few Israelis would want to harm or choose to harm. There's a difference between the citizens and the terrorists of Hamas. I mean, what they did, attacking citizens, families, slaughtering families in their own homes as they slept, and raping, killing parents in front of the children and children in front of parents, and taking captives. I know that, I hope we're all praying for peace. We need peace with justice. We need peace with security. Israel has a right to exist, and the Hamas charter is, you know, from the river to the sea. That land will be Jew-free. And, well, I could go on, but I just think that's an important thing to say at first, that anything negative I say is against the terrorists and not against the people of Gaza, many of whom are just pawns caught in this horrible war.
I've been a student for a while, and I'm still learning. And what you see is not all there is to the picture, by no stretch. It's much more complicated than what's being portrayed in sound bites on the news. Mm-hmm. It goes back past, you know, before 1948, when Israel was created a state. It goes way past that. It is when Israel was created as a state right after World War II and the like. And it was a territory that was under British control. So you have that reality. You have the fact that that region was referred to as the Middle East. Where'd that term come from? That's a problem all by itself. Middle relative to who and why. So you have that. And then you have, you know, I remember when President Jimmy Carter, who I respect, He wrote a book a few years ago called Palestine, Peace or Apartheid. He said this book is not about Israel, it's about Palestine. I mean, people confuse the two. And sad to say that whole region was a man-made, man-constructed configuration. And I think it's not lost on poetic license when you say Palestine rhymes with Frankenstein. It was a man-made monster on its best day. and so you see the remnants of that. And then you have the mandate of the children of Israel, the biblical children of Israel, to do justice. I think if you stick to the mandate of doing justice, it does a lot to help clear out confusion, because you want to do what's right for the foreigners, the neighbors, and the like. And I think that therein lies the key to it all. Is land grabs, is land confiscation, colonization, all those things create problems. And the poor Palestinians are the weakest among the whole lot. They have the least power in this whole scenario. And justice, biblical justice, tends to always advocate on behalf of the weak to protect them against the strength of the strong. So you have a lot of that going on there. Now, the Hamas attack, terrorist attack, I mean, there's zero explanation for that. But you have innocent people, children, who are caught in the middle of all of that monstrous mess. And I think that some divine guidance needs to be sought in the solution. You have leadership. I don't know how many Israelis or Israeli sympathizers feel about Netanyahu. He's a character all by himself.
That's
yeah, all by himself. And so I think when people say, well, I'm pro-Israel now, the key is to be pro-justice, to do the right thing. There's never, there's a wrong way to do right, but never a right way to do wrong. I think therein lies the solution to this whole situation. I think that there will never be peace in the Middle East until that desire, that aspiration is pursued with all deliberate speed. So,
If I can just say one sentence about what Clay said. I remember the first time I said, why is the West Bank called the West Bank? It's on the east, it's the East Bank, because it was Jordan. It's the West Bank of Jordan, and there were already camps there, refugee camps there. And Gaza, when we made peace with Egypt, it was understood that Gaza would go back to Egypt. That's where it came from. The people living in refugee camps, when Israel took over that area, were already living in refugee camps, and it was part of Egypt. And when Rabin made the peace with Egypt, we thought that they would take Gaza back, and Egypt said that then the deal's off.
A wise person once said, whenever you have more than one person, you're going to have conflict. And it seems to be historically that it takes a strong-armed leader to maintain some form of unity, and like the Pax Romana really wasn't peaceful, it was just dominated by Rome. Example in modern times, Yugoslavia, when it fell apart, look what happened. And the Balkans are still battling one another and still genocide with one another. My heart goes, I agree with you when you were saying that the people caught in the middle deserve our pity and our support as best on both sides. I don't think there's anyone in that whole area there whose hands are totally bloodless. We have people on both sides who are innocent and being put upon, and this tragedy, this obscenity, it's obscene what Hamas has done. That cannot be tolerated. But at the same time, there are other issues that need to be brought to the fore as well. But, as Pope Francis would say, the only party that you should belong to is the party of peace. Peace with justice, again, okay, but whose justice? You know, I think so Eastern and Western mindsets have different venues of what justice really means. And I'm sure the Hamas would say the justice is we go to the edge of the sea, that type of thing, no Jews there. The point is, it's the turmoil of that community in that area has been going on for thousands of years. It'll probably go on for more. Can there be a two-state solution? We've tried that to a point, and it was shortchanged in a sense. But in the meantime, people on both sides, the Jewish folks and the Palestinian folks who are caught in the middle of this, people trying to leave and a time that's impossible for them to leave and all this other good stuff. They need some support as well. I'm glad to see that the president's kind of putting some of that towards the Palestinian support as well, the money that he's giving towards in that whole area there. But it's, what are we going to do? You can look at the Judeo-Christian scriptures and say, okay, this is what justice is, but for those who do not hold the Judeo-Christian tradition, that's not what justice means for them. So we're going to have a long, my point is it's going to be a long and difficult road. And politically, I hate to see have strong men, to use that terminology, to be the ones who control this before we have any kind of, quote, peace.
My thinking is emotionally, Gaylia. How do you handle this kind of atrocities and then emotionally be able to have some sort of response instead of react? I mean, when you see the atrocities that have happened on television, as much as they're showing, you know, and the family members, how do they have that kind of restraint to be able to make decisions on judgment, you know, to go for what is just as opposed to striking back in just sheer absolute rage? How do you do that?
You know, my Israeli friends, you know, when they email or when we chat, I mean, they're just going from funeral to, you know, house of mourning to house of mourning. It's such a small country. I've never done the math, but I mean, it would be, you know, the equivalent. Everybody knows people who were affected, not just one person, but I mean, whole families have been wiped out. I have a friend who lives in Be'eri, and it's gone. I mean, he was injured, he's out of the hospital, he has nowhere to go home to, obviously he wouldn't want to go to that area anyway to recuperate, but there is nothing. His wife, his children are dead, his kibbutz is just totally destroyed. And the problem with reacting, and I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and say that the reason that the synagogue, this ancient synagogue in Tunisia, was destroyed, I'm going to say that it was because they believed or assumed, they believed Hamas, that it was Israel that fired the rocket that landed at the hospital or in the parking lot of the hospital, and hundreds of people were killed. And it turns out that it was a Hamas rocket that misfired. It's was given by Hezbollah. And so what you said about not just reacting, before they found out the truth, I believe in retaliation they destroyed this. I mean, it can never be. It's beyond being rebuilt. I mean, they just absolutely destroyed this synagogue in Tunisia, and reaction, you know. That's one's instinct. I just, you know, on behalf of Israel, want to say, I have never heard of anyone who was attacked so viciously and so outside the bounds of that there's a concept of international law for war is kind of a bizarre statement anyway. And yet Israel is telling people where to evacuate and allowing humanitarian aid to go in. They cut off fuel and water and supplies for a while because Hamas was taking it. They siphoned fuel from one of the hospitals for their own machines of war. I have never, ever heard of that, of warning that there's going to be an incursion here, you should head south, or giving, you know, free passage to civilians, knowing that members of Hamas can sneak through during that. I think that Israel at this point is just doing a heroic job of trying not to harm innocent people along with the radical terrorists.
And that's a delicate battle. You mentioned the word nowhere to go. I recall a quote from Golda Meir. I don't know how you feel about her, but she said Israel's greatest strength was they had nowhere to go. And because you have nowhere to go, you're forced to find solutions because you have no place else to go.
You know, that's an Israeli phrase, ein brera, there's no choice.
No choice. So you have no choice but to do the right thing. That's it. And stay there until you work it out, because you have nowhere else to go. And she says there'll never be peace until the Hamas or whoever else loves their children more than they hate their enemies.
Right.
So you're forced to let love be your guide to work it out. And Israel, biblical Israel, is God's chosen for a reason. Don't mean you get a free pass on everything, because the Bible said, I remember in Amos 9:7, so I think as much of the Ethiopians as I do you. I mean, you know more special to me than they are. I chose you so you can be an example of what the right thing looks like, and to show how suffering, there's redemption in suffering, and the world will see that there's a God operating through you, how you deal with your enemies, the least of these. So the way that Israel arguably is one of the most ideal, according to Jimmy Carter, most ideal democracies on earth exists in Israel.
Except for, in my opinion, over the last however long Netanyahu's been in power, his, you know, and everybody believe, well, he'll keep us safe. That's the one good thing. But he, just as we've seen in this country, politicians being co-opted by the right and moving further and further right because that's their base and that's who supports them. We've seen Netanyahu moving way, way over to the right. And some of
calling the Palestinian animals and stuff like that.
And people that he has put in power, you know, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Minister of Defense and things, who have no experience in that, no background in that. One of them never even served in the army, and they are discriminatory, oppressive people who do not represent the best of Israel. And the only reason that most Israelis were voting for him is because, you know, they trusted him to keep them safe.
So as we look forward, and Sally, I'll let you jump in there, what hope do you have? Where's your hope meter right now? Where do you see this going?
Oh, can I say one more thing
Yep.
about, okay, because in talking with my son who has been in the Middle East, who knows what this is, from the beginning, he said the Hamas children are taught hate. Very, very young, they're taught to hate. And that hate is much easier than to learn to love.
Especially when you're third generation growing up in poverty and discrimination and there is no hope
That's
there.
all you know.
Yeah. But the textbooks, you know, if you have 12 Jews and you kill 4 Zionist pigs, how many do you still have yet to kill? I mean, I have seen math books that
But he said in the States, we cannot imagine the level of hatred that exists in the Middle East.
Oppression in Palestine. You've got to keep in mind, that's a teeny tiny block of land with an extreme concentration of people in poverty. It's an extremely strange place. I was looking on the map of Kentucky. I'm going to bring it home. There's a city in Kentucky called East New Meridian, East Bend or something. It's the big toe of Kentucky. It's on the tip of Paducah.
Okay.
And it's completely surrounded by Missouri and Tennessee. It's a big toe of Kentucky that's not even connected to Kentucky. It's worse than the Upper Peninsula.
really.
It's a big toe of Kentucky that's not even connected. It's the weirdest thing, but it's Kentucky. So you gotta get through. You gotta cross the Mississippi to get to and cross over Missouri and Tennessee to get to Kentucky.
Wow.
How weird is that? That's kind of like the West Bank. It's just weird. It's a strange configuration.
Yeah.
So you have that concentration of a small amount of people in a small area. Many Palestinians got to go through all these checkpoints just to get to their own land. They can't just go down the street. It's just an extreme amount of, like Desmond Tutu, you said it's the worst form of apartheid he ever seen outside of South Africa. I mean, it's just a strange, on its best day, it's oppressive.
But they keep comparing it to 9/11. 9/11, you might know somebody in New York. You might have known something or somebody that died. There's a possibility. But in Israel, not only do you know the people that have died, but you also know the soldiers that are going to go fight.
Right.
So you are personally, it's a much more personal one-on-one. It's going to take a personal one-on-one kind of restraint to do the right
And
thing.
yet there are, in Israel, there's a lot of Israelis who work in the peace organizations, in the liberal Jewish organizations. They're sending care packages to into Gaza. All the hospitals have always served anyone who comes. They don't care where you come from. There's, I'm not saying that there's not issues going on, but there's a huge heart in Israel of caring for others. And in cities like Haifa, which is a very, has a lot of Arab Christians and a lot of Arab Muslims and a lot of Druze and Jews and everybody, maybe they live in their separate enclaves, they all do business together, and they're all trying to take care of each other and do the right thing.
Sally, to your point, you mentioned hate. They can't compete with the hate of the Hamas, but Israel can outlove them.
Yes,
They can outlove them.
let's hope that's
So
what
you
happens.
can't out-hate your enemy, but you can outlove them, and that's how you defeat your enemy. And it's going to be hard. Love is always hard. There's always a
Vengeance only brings more vengeance.
Right, so it's
hatred only
hard,
brings more
but
hatred.
that's the only hope. You have nowhere else to go.
And if you have a child that's been taught hate all their life, how do you take that child and reclaim that child? How do you do that?
Your question was, is there hope? I still have hope, but my bottom line is not yet. Not yet.
Time. All right, a related story, and Reverend Calloway said bring it closer to home. This is a close to home. Powerful donors to both Harvard and UPenn are withdrawing their financial support, saying the schools didn't go far enough to condemn anti-Semitism. There's also an effort to blacklist students from those schools who signed petitions interpreted as anti-Semitic. Some of the students claimed they didn't know what petition they were signing and these petitions blame Israel for the latest conflict. So let's turn to our panel. Your thoughts about donors' monies, those big schools, and people saying, don't give anymore.
I want to give one word on that word Semitic. Many people equate Semitism with Jews exclusively. Semitism does not mean that. It means a collection of languages, which includes Afro-Asiatic languages, Ethiopian, just a long collection of languages that are Semitic. Right. So we need to be clear on the language and what it means and what it does not mean. It does not exclusively
Good luck with
apply
that one.
to Jewish people.
No, because Arabs are Semites. And
They're Semites too.
Right.
So and Ethiopian, a lot of so let's be clear on the language. So you're talking about school and college. Let's go to school on the language. Like Dr. King famously said, let's get the language right. Let's rightly divide the words so we can be intelligent as we move forward using the right language.
Well, there's another distinction as well, which is highly debatable, but being anti-Semitic versus anti-Zionist. The whole thing is Zionist.
Now that's different.
Right.
Different, but
different.
Sometimes people
Conflate the
conflate
two,
them
but
together.
that's different.
But a lot of times they go hand in hand.
Yes.
There are some anti-Zionists who are not intrinsically anti-Semitic in the improper use of that
Correct,
term.
correct.
And yet, there's just so much. There's just so much. The schools, getting back to the issue of the schools.
Yes, please.
I appreciate what they're doing.
Which side, the schools or the donors?
Well, the donors, I think the donors are right. There's a new book out. I haven't read it yet. It just came in the mail. It's called Jews Don't Count. And it's talking about the rise of the liberals and how we're trying to be, or many people are trying to be, really into equality and equal rights for gay, lesbian, transgender, queer people, and equal rights for women, and equal rights for immigrants, and equal rights for this and that, but Jews don't count. And the rise of anti-Semitism in this country, which would be protected any other way, that you can't, oh, I don't want to rent to a black person, or I don't want to hire an Asian person, or I don't want to, whatever, that the increase of anti-Semitism here in America is just, people just are, and this is before the war with Hamas, that Hamas started. I do want to say one thing about things in America. A large group of liberal rabbis in Chicago went to the funeral of that young Palestinian boy, I think 6 years old, who was stabbed to death by his landlord
Right,
and
in
his
the
mother.
Bridgeview neighborhood.
Right.
Yep.
And a whole bunch of rabbis went to his funeral. And I know my daughter's congregation in New York, every Friday, starting in 9/11, and it still goes on, they have a welcome so that the Muslim population that comes for their Friday Sabbath service has welcome, and they can't be harassed on the way in or something. That there's this huge group of Jews there, and they came and stood around the synagogue on Friday night, you know, so that they would feel protected. So there is hope, and there are a lot of good people.
I see part of the issue as a conflation of rights opposing one another. We have the right to say freedom of speech, etc. And sometimes that means people can say things that we think are abhorrent. They can do that. But you also have the right of the individuals who can say, I don't want that said, I want to take my money back. And that's their right as well.
Take my money back. Stop giving money.
Stop giving,
money.
that's
Right.
what it is.
But even, I think some of them want their money back as well. But anyway, the point is, there are two rights, and whenever you have a democracy, as we say, whether it's here, Israel, whatever, those rights have to be in some way ameliorated. They are allowing one another to exist. You can't have, you say, a right of freedom of speech that overcomes common sense and something to, you can't go into a theater and say, fire, the type of thing. There are limits. None of those rights are absolute. But I see right now it's a battle, and we've got to sort that out. Are the contributors right in what they're doing? That's their decision. I don't know. Are the students and whoever the organizations who are coming out with this anti-Semitic, use the terminology, speech, they have that right, I presume, but I don't know all the particulars. We're just getting the sound bites coming at us. So I would say that to me, it's a conflation of rights, as it were, against one another as to which one precedes or which one follows. If the people stop giving their monies, it's going to hurt the university, so that will probably, the pocketbook's going to win on this, I think.
But the language has been hateful for some time now.
Yeah, but
it's been very hateful.
I know, and I agree with you. I think it should be there, but do they have a right to say that? I'd say yes.
But even if they have a right to say it, which in a private university, and I don't know how that all works. Harvard, just to use that one example that everybody was talking about, they did not come out against that statement. So if there's a Palestinian student union group, whatever, they have the right to say whatever they want, but Harvard can come out and say, this does not reflect the values of Harvard University.
Right.
And if they had done that, in this case I read about with the donor at Harvard.
Preemptively, so to speak, preemptive.
No,
on the-
even after, if
They
the
could give
student-
reactively.
They gave some clarification.
Right, and if the university had said, all our students have the right to free speech, but this does not represent Harvard, then the donor would not have pulled back the money.
Maybe.
No, that's what he said in an interview.
That's what
The
he said.
disclaimer.
Well,
Disclaimer.
The disclaimer before or even after.
Well, a disclaimer to this program is we're out of time. Thanks to Clay, Calloway, Gaylia, Rooks, Sally McClain, and Tony Smith. You can catch this program again anytime on YouTube. Just go on YouTube and search for Moral Side of the News. Until next week, we'll start the conversations all over again each and every week. Until then, so long for now.